So I'm gonna go ahead and share the link to go, like, how you get to the Nearpod. So go to that link, and then Anika, you don't have to do this. And then Abigail, if you could send the code again, because I think, or actually I can just copy and paste it real quick. Okay, yeah, you got it. Awesome. So yeah, and then we can go ahead and get started. So Abigail, could you share your screen so we can see the Nearpod? Awesome.
See it?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So Anika's conversation is the secret to being a revolutionary activist. And so we can go to the next slide. So just a little about Anika. Anika is the executive director of the Youth Activism Project, a DC-based organization that helps teens build movements. She co-founded the Youth Activism Project's first advocacy campaign, Schoolgirls Unite, at the age of 12. As a Schoolgirls Unite leader, Anika was empowered by the substantive change she contributed to before she could even vote, such as successfully lobbying for a $200 million increase in foreign aid for education. For Anika, these experiences propelled a lifelong determination to pay her experiences forward to as many youth as humanly possible. Prior to leading the Youth Activism Project, Anika worked with underserved teens in multiple intergenerational contexts, from community organizing in Nicaragua to teaching English in Malaysia. Anika finds motivation in the stories of her fellow activists, as well as the magical synergy that happens when youth and adults work together in pursuit of a better world. So without further ado, this is Anika. And Anika, do you want to say a few things before we get started?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Madison, for the warm intro. Let's go ahead and get started with the icebreaker question, and we dive right into the topic of today.
Yeah. So I mean, just a couple of things first about like how to participate. So Nearpod, obviously you guys have already joined that. And so the main feature that we use in Nearpod is called the discussion board. So Anika will pose a question that she's pre-written out, and then you'll type in your answers, and then she's going to interact with your answers, and we'll start that off with an icebreaker. And then so as far as follow-ups, you can indicate in the Zoom chat if you want to ask her a follow-up about anything that she says, her answer to the question, and she can actually ask you a follow-up as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the first question.
And because we're a small group, I'm also thinking for this like icebreaker, we can just do it vocally. So I can start off. So I would say the emoji that defines me the best is the upside down face emoji, because I feel like it just captures silliness in like kind of a subtle way. I don't know. There's like multiple uses for it, so I dig that emoji. Maybe we could do popcorn style. So I'm gonna pick on Nick, the sixth grader.
All right. Which emoji defines me? That's a good question. I use Bitmojis a lot, actually. I don't know if this is cheating to do that, but I like the Bitmojis. I feel like they're more expressive, and they can be applied to more situations. Otherwise, I would say I use the face palm one a lot when I've done something wrong.
Do you want to popcorn it to the next person?
Sure. Madison.
Okay, so I would say the one that's like the person smiling and there's hearts like here, here, and here, just because it's like super happy, and like I feel like I'm a happy person, and I don't know, I like to use that emoji a lot. I guess I'll popcorn to Dario. You might need to give some context to that.
So I have internally the nickname of Banana Man because during my fellowship time, I used to wear banana suits whenever like the mood got boring in our Junto groups, which is like our inner circle groups where we discuss our assignments, and it just stuck. And yeah, I'm nicknamed Banana Man, and yeah, I obviously like a lot of banana products, banana bread, bananas, banana cheesecakes. I've had that before.
Never heard of that.
It's like a banana flavored cheesecake. I tried it when I was at Disney Springs.
Is it good?
Um, Tastes exactly like the Laffy Taffy banana thing with a little bit of cheese.
Oh, banana cream pie. I feel like banana cream pie is the standard for banana desserts, right?
Yep. So yeah, banana man.
Hey Luna, I didn't even see that you joined. I'm gonna go ahead and send the link and the code again, so you can get on the Nearpod.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, Jeriel, now you can pick on someone.
Big Gary.
The rocket ship emoji, of course. We gotta lift off. We gotta lift off from 2D thinking. Nice GIF. Luna, what's your favorite emoji?
I like the emoji that has like the hand displaying something with the hair flip.
Like this?
Yeah, exactly.
I think Abigail's the last one.
Oh, I like the sloth and the otter. I rarely have reason to use them, but they are really cute.
Did not know those were emojis, so I have to check that out.
The otter
cool.
one's so cute.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for engaging in that quick icebreaker. Let's go on to the next, I guess the next slide. All right, so today's topic is all about kind of the secret to being a revolutionary activist. So I thought before we dive right into that topic, it might be a good idea to get on the same page about what activism is about. So yeah, what are some answers that folks have? You can either put it in the Nearpod or you can shout it out.
Hey Will, I know you're just joining, but we are on a Nearpod right now. So if you can go to this link and then enter this code, and then you'll be able to see all these slides and enter your answers as well.
That's a good one, Nick. Advocating for a cause that will better our society. How do folks feel about that definition? Banana Man says being playing an active role in decision making. I love that, the having decision making in that definition as well. Shifting unjust systems, they're all great answers. Showing support or opposition to a social issue. Cool. Maybe we can move on to the next slide. I feel like we have some good answers here. The way that I would define activism is acting in an engaged, it's the act of engaging in an organized and sustained way in order to bring forth social and political change in one's community. So there were a lot of answers that talked about social change, social issues. I think advocating, decision making is also something that I would love to add in this definition. One thing that I'd want to emphasize is the idea of being organized and sustained. I think a lot of times when we talk about activism, it gets a bad rep for being sort of like a one-time thing, or it's more talk than real action. And so one thing that I really want to emphasize in that definition is that it's actually a sustained, activism is a sustained state of being. Does anyone want to respond to any of that before I move on to the next question? I feel like we're on a pretty good page in terms of the definition. Cool. So let's move on to the second question. So yeah, what would you say makes an activist effective? And if folks would rather verbalize their answers, that'll be great as well. Darielle, would you like to talk a little bit more about social capital? Like, can you define that?
You could be an activist and make yourself heard any day, but being an effective activist and getting other people to join that movement as well, since that's how change happens in the U.S. It's by the plurality, like I said, English plurality, and not just by one person. So if you have social capital and are able to convince other people about your opinion, having people trust that opinion, and on the end, having a plurality to create change is necessary to be an effective activist. If you don't really expand on your opinions and trying to convince other people, then that would just be considered a social media activist or somebody that wants to make themselves heard and is just preaching to the choir.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I love that focus on building trust, right? That's what marks the difference between someone who just is either preaching to the choir or just, airing out their grievances on social media without an end. It's like, well, do people actually have you built trust? And I think what you were kind of indicating is that there are a variety of ways of building trust. That actually connects a lot to what we're going to talk about later. So I'm excited that you brought that up. Nick, can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by long-term systemic change?
Yes. It's almost like the difference between eating candy and the short-term feel-good nature of that versus eating a healthy, well-balanced meal and kind of and doing that over the long term and the benefits that'll accrue from it. In order to really be effective, I think you want to focus on those long-term, holistic, systemic goals so that the systems that you're trying to shift really are coming around and really are functioning properly, as opposed to just kind of quick short-term wins, which might be necessary in order to get to that long-term change. But you never want to sacrifice, I think, that kind of longitudinal outlook for those short-term easy wins, just like having candy for dinner.
Great, I love that analogy. Any other thoughts or responses to any of these kind of definitions that we have on the board right now?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, it's not directly correlated to what Darielle said, but it made me think that I think a lot about being an effective activist is just inspiring people. So inspiring people to join the movement and just to get them supercharged about a certain issue or movement is really key to being effective.
Okay, so we have, just in summary, focus on building trust, social capital, do you have good relationships, focus on long-term systemic change, and also the ability to inspire others. These are all awesome answers. So I can share my answer. It's not a full answer, but it definitely is kind of adds on to what you all have been saying. So, and I think it actually really ties really well to a lot of the stuff. So I think in terms of Darielle's point about social capital, what I feel like an effective activist does is they show up, they understand the importance of relationships, and they understand the importance of doing something with a lot of intentionality. And I think that connects with a lot what Darielle was saying in terms of building that social capital, right? Like if you don't show up, if you don't physically show up with your body, you're, I mean, now it's hard with COVID, but I mean, we've been seeing how, you know, the protests have been necessary to you know, promote change, and you can't really do much if you just kind of stay at home, right? So, I mean, I think there are also ways that we've been innovating in terms of showing up in virtual spaces, right? Like with conversations like this, with town halls that one would hold with elected officials and other power holders in your community. So showing up virtually and in person, I think, is something that we're kind of emphasizing more and more. When I mean, and I want to say a little bit about what I mean by intentionality. So intentionality, I think, refers to both kind of having like a strategic mindset, and also just like every action that you do has some sort of intention behind it when you're an activist, right? You don't just do things willy-nilly. There's always a thought behind it, whether that's actually your activist strategy or whether it's learning how to be a better ally and accomplice, and you know, kind of everything in between. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize is that an effective activist understands the difference between power and influence. So so actually, does anyone want to talk about what they think the difference between power and influence is?
I mean, I think just because you're powerful doesn't mean you're influential. I mean, I can think of a number of government positions where that could be true. So,
Yeah.
That's a great point, Madison.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, like, we see it right now in the battle that's playing out for the Supreme Court. Just because like one side has power to do that, like they literally have a, you know, majority of the Senate, that doesn't mean that they actually like wield influence over others, right? And it's how you exercise that power that can allow you to yield that influence over others.
Yeah, awesome points, right? So power can be thought of as some sort of mechanism to actually, like, you have the authority to bring about certain change, whether it's making policies or making a decision in terms of a confirmation. And then influence is like, you may not have the authority to make a decision one way or another, but you can influence the power holders, right? And so all of us here, we can build influence even if we're not elected to, you know, public office. So awesome. I'm glad that you all know what that difference is. You're on your way to being an effective activist. The other thing, I think this goes to what Nick was saying, is that you're, you know, really focusing on systemic change, right? And in order to really push for systemic change, you have to really understand what the root causes of issues are, right? And so, and distinguishing the difference between the symptoms of the problem and its root causes. And I think that also ties to the difference between charity and justice, right? I mean, you need both for sure. You need to address the symptoms of a problem, say like littering, for example. You know, people need, if there's litter on the ground, there needs to be some sort of mechanism to clean that up. But if you actually really want to see a stop to littering, what should you invest in? It's a question to you all.
Can we like shout out?
Yeah, we're a small group, so I want to have this be like a back and forth as much as possible as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you would invest more in like the root causes of the issues, like more education around what littering does to the environment, more, I guess, organizations that let younger folks experience the benefits of keeping their environment clean, all that stuff.
Exactly, right. And so, and then finally, you know, this relates to a little bit to the power influence point, but it's slightly different. So like an effective activist understands the difference between being a leader and also having a leadership position. So another kind of mini question, sub question to ask you all is, what do you think I mean by that?
I mean, same thing as a power. Like, just because you have a leadership position doesn't necessarily make you a leader. I mean, I don't think we really teach people really how to be leaders enough, and like what it really means to, I mean, be an effective leader. So that's just what I would say.
Yeah, and it's kind of going back to what Nick was saying about how we have these leaders who are power holders, but no one really appreciates them for their leadership because of how they've been wielding their power, right? So that's, I think, one way where there's a bit of like a nefarious sort of undertone to how some folks in leadership positions wield power, but there's also a side to it where I think we see this a lot in young leaders, and I'm a millennial. And in chatting with both millennials and Gen Z, I think there's like a tendency to want a leadership position but not assume the responsibility, right? And just want the title. And so there's this sort of spectrum between like, if you just want the title for the sake of title, or if you want power for the sake of power, it could be at worst like, at best you're not doing anything, at worst you're actively harming people, right? So how do you really think about assuming that responsibility and really understanding what leadership is, and really like ditto what Madison said about like we don't teach leadership enough, and that's why I'm really excited to do this session, because I think a lot of these lessons are lessons that are not taught early on. And so, and I think with the kind of advent of organizations like Civics Unplugged, like the Youth Activism Project, I think we're slowly moving in that direction, but we need these lessons at the school level as well. Any other thoughts before I move on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you go about, like, let's say you are in a youth-led organization, right? And it's a lot of just young people with really no adults, or anyone kind of supervising. How would you go about ensuring that no one is really just using it for a title? And I know there's like a lot of like these terms of like performance activism, slacktivism, whatever. How would you go about kind of avoiding that, or talking to someone who you think is doing that, and like reckoning or whatever the word may be?
That is, I think, kind of the golden question in a lot of my work, right? I think for me, one thing that I do with my activists when they join the Youth Activism Project is I try to really, before we kind of do anything in terms of like, okay, what is the issue that you want to solve? What are the ways of going about it? What kind of structure you want to create for your organization? I always try to have folks tap into their why. Like, why are you really doing this, right? Like, and understanding like this is a significant amount of work, right? Is it Thanasi? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, sorry. I was just like, my schedule got super messed up, so I'm making dinner. That's why my camera's off. But yeah.
Okay, cool. And Thanasi, I think you're also asking like, so can I ask a clarification question? Like, are you talking about like if you're in a youth-led organization and there are people in the group that you can tell are just leaders for the sake of leaders, like how to, in terms of interpersonal dynamics, how to deal with that, or at like the relationship between adult allies and youth activists? Yeah.
Probably the former, right? Because I think there's a lot of situations where there's like a group of young people and it's obvious or semi-obvious that someone's just doing it for the title, but is actually harming the organization. And like, how do you go about talking about it even?
Yeah. I mean, I really want to bring in other people to answer this question, but I think, yeah, for me, I think it's really the importance. Like in our curriculum, for example, we talk about having real talk with people, and how to exactly do that, how to broach these difficult topics. But I think it's also like a matter of teaching those that might not necessarily, that are in the organization that might not necessarily have a particular title, to kind of assume bravery and say, hey, like you're the leader of this organization, and these are the ways where your leadership is not is not enabling us to do the work that we need to do, right? So I think there's a way of potentially framing that in terms of like, can you help me be like, I'm like deferring to you because you have this title, can you help me out here? Like, can we work together to really figure this out? I think there's a concept that, if we had more time, I'd love to go into it. This idea of informal authority versus formal authority really, ties back to the theme of like, what does it mean to have an official title? I think like emphasizing to folks, you don't need an official title to exercise leadership, right? You don't need an official title to have social capital, to build trust. And so I think like I think it really goes back to both adult allies and young folks teaching each other this idea that you can be a leader without the title. I think that'll be my short answer to this. Like, you can be a leader without the title, and if you feel like the leader with the title is not really assuming that role, you need to stand up and say, hey, there's this problem. How do we fix it? I'm sorry, that was like a long-winded. It's a hard question, so you probably saw me visibly struggling to answer it. But I think the summary is that you can be a leader without the title. If more people know about that, I think the better will, like, youth-led groups and adult-led groups are off. So are there any other thoughts that people would like to share to that question? Because I think it's a really good question.
I think that's a great response. I really like hearing that you're actively teaching leadership. We try to do that also. We have a lesson like built around leadership, and trying to stress exactly what you're saying, that if there's a void or a vacuum there, then you as a CU fellow should consider stepping up and filling it. And the fellows that you see on this call and the ones that are actively now leaders in our community, they were not just given titles, right? That they filled those voids. They stepped up, right? And I think that needs to be the kind of process. It's not something that's just handed to someone. Like, there's an egalitarian element to it. Everybody has that fair chance at it. But it was only the fellows that actually filled that void and decided to make that, to step up, that are now in kind of leadership positions.
Yeah, I mean, I just really think, I think what Nick was kind of elaborated on is something that I was thinking as I was trying to think of a coherent response to that. But like, those that do it for the title, I don't think they last long at the end of the day, right? There's always someone who acknowledges the problem and finds a way to fill that void. So yeah, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I was about to say. It's like, normally when someone's doing something through the title, you can, like, even if you're needing to have a conversation about it, you can usually start the conversation off with like a different starting point, because they're doing it for the title, they're probably not going to be putting in their best effort. It's going to be, affecting the organization or their work. So it's like a starting point. Like, you start talking about, like, the quality of your work has been, not at its best. And so it's like, there's symptoms of that for if people don't care about what they're actually doing.
Exactly.
And then just another question I have.
Sure.
So it kind of made me smile when I saw intentionality on there, because that's something that we talk a lot about at CU, is like purpose. Like, and I feel like it can be so easy, just like in society and like today, to just do things mindlessly and not be super intentional about them. So my question to you would be, just like in the realm of like your own activism, or just, the Youth Activism Project as a whole, how do you force yourself to always be intentional and purposeful about the things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think that's something that, that's the ongoing challenge, right? Of making sure that you do everything with intentionality. I could say for myself, like, I think for those that are people of faith, and I like consider myself an agnostic Muslim. So I grew up Muslim, but also have my hesitations about religion. But one thing that I really love about my faith practice is the importance that we put on intentionality. So I think that's something that, like, if that there's like there are values that you're raised with that kind of really draw that out. I think that's something that I would encourage folks to really explore. In terms of how we do that, teaching our activists how to behave intentionally, and also doing a practice for ourselves. I think one thing that I try to do, and I'm not great at it, is to always kind of evaluate, if I was in a situation where, for example, I wasn't a good ally. I think intentionality for me comes up a lot if I feel like I haven't been a good ally. So it's something where I try to evaluate myself, like, is there something that I could have done differently? Or even in engaging with my colleagues, you know, activism work is really hard. Social justice work is really hard. I think, you know, there are studies done in terms of like how like lack of intentionality in interpersonal relationships and like the stress of this work can really really kind of have this sort of contradictory effect in terms of like the change you want to make. So like, how are you going to promote social justice if you don't promote social justice within your own interpersonal relationships? So something that I'm trying to do is always evaluate, like, you know, am I being triggered, for example? Like,
it might be just me, but I think you're frozen. Is it anyone else experiencing that?
Yeah. The camera froze.
Yep.
hi.
Oh.
Hey.
Sorry about that. That was actually good timing because let me just turn the light on real quick so that I'm not talking to you all in the dark. Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
All right, that has never happened to me before. That's so strange. Just to wrap up that question really quickly, I think the short answer is like building in mechanisms to create space for that sort of intentionality. I think when you're an activist and you're creating strategy, right, you really can't do actions without some sort of strategy because you'll learn quickly that, you know, you won't achieve the change that you want. But I think in terms of like the interpersonal stuff, I think there's always like one thing that we do is we have people always ground, if they're going to do activism, it's like, well, you need to really ground your work in an anti-oppressive lens, right? So if you're someone who is comes from like marginalized identities or multiple marginalized identities, how do you build that like critical consciousness in terms of really understanding like how systemic oppression manifests? But if you're someone who also has privileges, like I'm someone who has multiple oppressed identities, but also I have a lot of privileges. So how do you negotiate all of that? How do you and like having that foundation early on, I think is also something important in terms of like building that intentionality. So if folks have other questions, maybe we can save them till the end, but I'm really glad, I love that conversation. I could stay on these topics forever. But we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next question, which is all, you know, all related, right? So, and if folks do like, you know, if you have questions and you don't want to lose them, you can go ahead and put in the chat as well. If the Nearpod isn't the right place to put that. Okay, so I think this might have been spoiled, but what do you think is the #1 quality an activist should have?
Empathy.
Gary says empathy. Gary, you want to elaborate on that?
I mean, this goes along with systems thinking, like hand in hand. So our world is becoming increasingly less homogenous. So you can't just think like yourself. You have to think like the people that are in the systems you're trying to shift. You're trying to think like the diverse coalition that you're trying to build to shift that system. You got to think like the media. You got to think like all sorts of stakeholders that are necessary to move things forward. You got to think like your team. You got to really empathize with their emotional needs. Gotta worry about your spouse or partner. Gotta worry about your parents, what they think about your activism. So this is helpful. I've actually never said that. This is, but it's kind of it. But I just noticed that like when people don't think of other people, when they're like, oh yeah, we need to fix this thing, and then like, well, I've actually been part of activist or like movement type things where the leader is actually ironically extremely unempathetic the needs of people that are serving, that are like following them. So, yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, I'm going to actually segue into my answer because I think it ties really well into my answer. And I think being a systems thinker, like what Nick put there, and like what Darielle put in terms of work ethic, those are like really important. But I think Gary, and then also Thanasi with community minded, I think those ideas of like, you know, back to this whole thing of relating to others, I think that is really getting close to my answer. In terms of what I think is a secret to being an effective activist or a revolutionary activist. So my answer is vulnerability. I think the number one quality an activist should have is vulnerability. And I think that ties a lot into empathy and also kind of being community oriented as well. But you know, why? So this is my next question. Why do folks think? Why do you think that I think vulnerability is so important? Or in general, why is vulnerability so important to activism?
I think
Then also go ahead.
I think to be an activist, you have to, like Gary said, be mindful of everybody else, but you also have to be, I think you said it before, like mindful of the actions you're taking, especially if you're an activist that's advocating for a community that you're not specifically a part of. You just have to be very open to, you know, critiques, criticisms, comments. You have to be able to grow and change and be vulnerable in yourself, or else you're not going to be able to serve whoever you're trying to serve.
Beautifully said. I mean, I think one of the themes that I've been, oh, sorry. And then Nick, you wanted to say something too.
Thanasi said most of it. I feel like I'm back in college or high school where somebody says your answer. But yeah, just because you can't really learn unless you're vulnerable, right? Like the first step to learning something is feeling like you don't know and acknowledging that, right? And being like, oh, there's a gap. There's a gap in my knowledge here. Like I need to read this book on the Civil War because I know nothing about the Civil War. Like you have to be vulnerable to admit that, even if it's just yourself. And I think that's an important step of being an activist too, is learning.
Exactly. And I think, you know, one of the themes that we've been really emphasizing here is the role that ego has been playing in activism, how ego really seems like the antidote to activism, right? And the way to combat ego is vulnerability, right? It is acknowledging that you don't know something. It is acknowledging that you're always in a kind of learner sort of mindset. That's actually one of the learning versus knowing is something that I wanted to put in the previous slide in terms of like, what are some qualities? But another reason, another framing that I think vulnerability is so important is, okay, and then you can go into the, I think the next slide had the questions, but if we can go to the answer to that slide. So we talked about, you know, the value of putting aside ego. We talked about the importance of learning. I think kind of related to all of that is, so the next slide, please, is, you know, kind of understanding how that all relates to leadership. And so I'm really glad that we talked about, we stressed the importance of not knowing what leadership is because, or that people aren't taught what leadership is because that is so tied to activism, right? It's so tied to vulnerability. And so, so my definition of leadership is, next slide, please. This is borrowing from my former professor, Marshall Gans, who is a really famous community organizer and who's really influenced the way I think about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Marshall Gans is dope. He's really like helped me think through. I've been doing activism since I was 12, and and he really blew my mind in terms of how to think about organizing and activism and leadership. And so his definition is, leadership is accepting the responsibility to create the conditions that enable others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. It is a mouthful, and I was thinking about cutting it down or rephrasing it a little bit. But no, this is actually kind of perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and break it down a little bit so that it's easier to grasp. So
Brilliant.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Gary.
This is brilliant.
Why do you think it's so brilliant?
I mean, yeah, you might want to, like, you know, it's oh, let's make it shorter, but like every word is very carefully picked. So
very intentional, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into each part. So leadership is accepting the responsibility. So I'd love this to be a little bit more of like a back and forth, but I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'll just go ahead and
it's okay if we don't get to all of them. Like the purpose of these is to go into like long conversation threads. So I mean, ultimately, like the slides are doing what they're supposed to if we don't get to all of the questions, right? So I mean, I mean, unless you really like want to get to the end, I mean, I don't see a reason why we can't just say if we get on a good conversation topic.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Well, let's go ahead. I feel like the end, you know, it's just a bunch of examples of well, all right, let me ask you all, like, so let's focus on the accepting the responsibility part. Like, what if you have any immediate thoughts? I'll pause for a couple of seconds if you have immediate thoughts of like why that part is so important.
I'd say in unjust systems, well, part of systems thinking is realizing that no one person created the problem, but leaders can be so inspiring that they take responsibility for making things better, even though they were not the ones that created the conditions that need to be changed. And so I think that if you use that definition, if you use this phrase, accepting responsibility, when we think about our president, for example, right? And I'm not like,
I'm not going into a partisan thing here, but
yeah, I mean, I'll say most of our leaders across the political spectrum don't accept responsibility, and that affects whether we can get things done because no one wants to start.
That's awesome. Yeah. So there's an element of there in terms of like, even though I didn't cause this problem, I want to take responsibility because this is bigger than me, right? I think the reason why this part resonates with me a lot and why I kept it was because, you know, again, it's like, if you're going to have the title, if you're going to assume leadership, it's a responsibility, right? It's a lot of hard work. And so accepting that responsibility is critical to being a good leader, right? All right, so next slide. Let's focus on the create the conditions that enable others part. What does that mean?
I think it's more of like being the platform for other people to, like, when shared purpose is one thing, but I think it's also just like for people to find their own voices and to become like self-sufficient in helping themselves and then helping their communities without your help.
That's exactly right. Like, you're not enabling others, you are creating the conditions that enable others, right? And then shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. What does that bring out for people? And that's the next slide too, just highlighted.
I'm sure that Marshall read this definition a while ago, but it's only more and more true. We've never experienced as much uncertainty. Almost like the only thing that is certain is that we can't predict the future.
Yeah.
There's too many variables now. And yeah, so never before have we needed leaders that adopt this definition of leadership. That's awesome.
Too many variables. The future is so uncertain. That is activism. That's the definition of activism, right? Too many competing interests, too many stakeholders. I think that's what you mentioned, Gary, previously. Leadership is anything but certain. or activism is anything but certain. You never know if your strategy is going to work. You never know anything, honestly. It's hard to create shared purpose in the face of all of that. So let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about how hard that is. I guess we kind of, sorry, I totally missed. I think we like answered this already kind of. But let's go ahead and go into why vulnerability is so foundational to this. Which is the next slide. So when you think about what prevents people, can we go to the next slide? Sorry. So when you think about what prevents people to engage in some sort of action, here are a couple of variables there: inertia, apathy, fear, isolation, and self-doubt. Right? It can be very hard to overcome these what we call action inhibitors. But let's go to the next slide. But the way to do that, right, is to think about urgency and how that overcomes inertia. Anger is the antidote to apathy. Hope is the antidote to fear. Solidarity and trust, add trust to that graphic, is what overcomes isolation. And the idea of you can make a difference, or self-empowerment, self-sufficiency was another term that I heard, is what overcomes self-doubt. And so I argue that emotional and vulnerability, and Marshall Gantz to a certain extent argues that emotion and vulnerability is the basis of all of these action inhibitors. So if we go to the next slide. So some examples that I have here are, if you share your honest leadership journey, right, especially the vulnerable parts, the parts where you felt disempowered, or the parts that, doesn't necessarily paint you in the best light, that helps other people relate, right? It's all about making sure that others know that you're human as well. So you could be the most inspiring leader, but if you aren't able to connect with people on that level, they're not able to take part in those conditions that enable them to step into their own leadership, right? So if you share your honest leadership journey, that allows people to relate and build on your story, right? So that they can create their own leadership journey. If you are, I think one of the things that I've been seeing in my work is the hesitance amongst youth activists to really talk about, to really show their anger, to show their emotions. I've been trying to get people to create these videos to talk about why it's so important for people to register to vote. And there's just this hesitance to kind of putting them out there and speaking emotively, right? But if you don't do that, you're not really emphasizing the urgency and just the anger and just awfulness that's going on, right? That's what's going to combat inertia. And so part of it's also acknowledging others for their strengths, especially strengths that you might not have, taking about accountability when you mess up. So yeah, what are some other examples that people want to think about as it relates to how vulnerability shows up, how vulnerability is able to create those conditions that enable others to step into their leadership?
I think vulnerability is important for leaders just because it helps set the tone. I know I was struggling with this a couple months ago, and Gary was talking to me about how important that is, and just if you as a leader are vulnerable, then people will follow, and it's kind of like a chain reaction, and it helps everyone as a whole when you as a leader are vulnerable.
Have you, Anika, have you watched this YouTube channel called Jubilee?
I'm not aware.
So it fosters dialogue. They have these setups where they foster dialogue between for example, three people that feel one way about, they're very pro cop, and then three people that are like criminal justice activists or something like that, and then they put them in situations where they're almost inherently vulnerable because they're on camera talking to each other about really hard issues. In this talk, which is right now, which is so good, this dialogue right here, helped me see reminded me of the connection between vulnerability and empathy. Because how do you, you don't even give people something to empathize with if you are not vulnerable.
I gotta check out Jubilee. Thank you for that recommendation. I'm not big on YouTube because I know my life would just go down the drain. I knew more channels to follow, but yeah, I'll check that one out for sure. What else are folks? Yeah, I'm clearly no. Okay, okay. Just a side note, real quick. So YouTube has been huge for millennials, and I think Gen Z has taken it to a different level. But I definitely don't think that's not it's. I'm not a millennial, even though I am a millennial because I'm not huge on YouTube. But yeah, I used to be back in high school. So
Millennials come from the Gundam style age.
What does that mean?
Like old YouTube 2016 when they still have that old design for their website.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Old YouTube is not 2016. Old YouTube is like
2012.
2008.
2007.
We're really revealing our ages now, aren't we?
Yeah, when it was like cat videos.
What it was like really just, it was like Kev Jumba. Does anyone remember that? Like,
yeah,
quality it was 480p.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, so it's definitely a generational thing, but millennials were part of that when YouTube was a thing. All right, that was like a crazy tangent. But yeah, what else is coming up for folks?
One quick thing here, Anika, that I think really underscores. You've convinced me that vulnerability is like the primary condition for leadership, and I'll tell you why. Because and for social movements too, because Gary and I talk a lot about this Professor Cass Sunstein, who has this theory about social movements that, like, in order for them to really take off, you need people who he defines as, like, he puts people on a spectrum between like 1 and 7, I think, or 1 and 8, about being ready to make a social movement happen, and what he used was the Metoo movement as an example of this. He studied the Metoo movement for years, and it was only because there were women who felt like they could be vulnerable enough to step out and make those accusations, and those people are the ones essentially in society that can show that vulnerability and put themselves out there, that they created that movement, that cascade, right? And then others followed. But if they weren't vulnerable, then they would not have succeeded, right? That's what it was all about. And so thank you for putting like this final piece together for us. It's been kind of missing, I think, from what we've been thinking about. So this has been fantastic.
Yeah, Nick, just give me ideas of how we can make our curriculum better. Obviously, crediting Anika.
And I have to say, like, your questions have really, really made me think about how we can make our curriculum better as well, especially in terms of like how can we bake in, more time for reflection, more time for intentionality. The question that Thanasi, sorry about that, asked about, like we talk a lot about having real talk from the leadership side of if there are members in your organization that have different roles and aren't kind of stepping up to those roles, how do you have real talk as the kind of the power holder, the accountability person, etc. But we don't talk about it nearly enough in terms of like the other way around. So that's something that's definitely like I've come away with from this conversation. And yeah, no, I'm so thrilled to hear that. I just feel like we need to chat more and talk about how we can do things together, because I feel like we're on the same page about a lot of stuff. So
definitely.
Yeah. Any last thoughts?
I think that like what this has helped me realize is a lot of the reasons. I mean, obviously people are like, oh, performance activism is bad, or people get involved just to say they're getting involved. But this kind of puts a reason to the argument that people shouldn't just get involved because they want like a title, and they want to like seem like they're getting involved. So it's been just super helpful to, again, I guess, connect all the dots on that one.
I love it. Cool. Well, thank you all for hosting me or having me have this conversation with you all. And I'm super stoked. I think in terms of next steps, should I continue chatting with Madison?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this was super awesome. Again, thank you so much for coming and taking the time for all the questions and everything. And I mean, I think we just learned so much. It's super helpful, especially because, you know, we have the fellowship coming up. We have our applications open, and we're really talking a lot about curriculum and design right now. So this is going to be super helpful going forward. But yeah, I mean, I can send you like Nick's contact, Gary's contact, or anything else. And we can kind of start thinking more about how we can, you know, what our relationship looks like going forward. I mean, Nick, have anything to say on that, Gary?
Yeah, definitely. I actually spoke to Wendy from Youth Activism Project a while back, and so I know we have lots of shared values. This is how it all started, I think, this conversation. So we'd love to, you know, keep talking, and maybe we could pull off like a co-led event later in the year or early next year with our two orgs and our young people together.
Yeah, Nick, I have your contact info, so I can circle.
Addison, could you send me a copy of this presentation after? I want to share some of these slides with my leadership class tomorrow.
Of course.
Actually, Darielle, I'm going to send you the updated version too, because they look a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dario's going to take credit for it all. That's not being a real leader, Dario.
I'm not taking credit for it. I'm just going to share some snippets and be like, yo, Banana Man did this all. Wait, what? No, Anika made this all.
I also love that you have a leadership class in high school. I don't think I have
It's
that.
our student government club. They turned into a leadership class and we get honors credit for it.
That makes sense. Cool. And I will also connect you with our social media people. So.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well,
thank you so much.
Yeah, more soon.
Okay, thank you guys for coming. See you
Bye.
later.
Bye.